Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror Blu-ray movie review video as part of my current series where I'm taking a look at horror movies from my standard Blu-ray collection and reviewing them throughout the month here. So today we're gonna go old school a little bit. We're gonna take a look at an 80s slasher movie from my Blu-ray collection, and that is 1987's Killer Workout, which I have here on Blu-ray through Slasher Video here. So yeah, Killer Workout. I actually just added this to my collection maybe earlier this year. I don't exactly remember when, but it's one of many 80s slasher movies that I have. Um, I'm not like slasher movies are probably kind of middle of the road for me as far as my subgenres of horror, but 80s slasher movies are they go to the top. That's probably one of my top three favorite. I just love the cheesiness of them, the sort of the tropes of them. So, and this movie definitely has that. So let's go ahead and get into Killer Workout from 1987. So the Killer Workout, originally titled Aerobi-cide, is a 1987 American slasher film written and directed by David A. Pryor and starring Marcia Carr, David James Campbell, Fritz Matthews, Ted Pryor, and Teresa Van Wood. The story revolves around a Los Angeles fitness club owner by Rhonda Johnson, whose twin sister burned in a tanning salon 5 years ago. Detective Morgan begins to investigate the gym after several of its members are brutally murdered by an unknown attacker. So that's the sort of the gist of the movie. So basically, it opens with a young model named Valerie who was burned in a tanning salon accident. 5 years later, Valerie's twin sister, Rhonda Johnson, is operating a fitness club in Los Angeles. Rhonda chastises one of her employees, Jamie, for missing an aerobics class she was supposed to lead. Shortly after, a killer brandishing a large safety pin enters the woman's locker room and slashes Rachel, a client, to death. While closing the club, Jamie finds her corpse stuffed in a locker, as well as a blood soaked knitting needle in the locker of Diane Matthews. Detective Morgan is assigned to the murder case and questions Rhonda and Jamie. The next day, Chuck is unexpectedly hired by Rhonda's senior managing partner of the club. Chuck gets into a physical fight with patron Jimmy, which impresses club patron Debbie, Jimmy's ex girlfriend. Later, Morgan learns that Diane's knitting needle was not the weapon used to kill Rachel. Later that night, a group of teenagers vandalize the club with spray paint, only to be brutally murdered by an unseen assailant. So yeah, that's the setup and the premise for Killer Workout or Robicide, if you will. As far as the cast goes, we have Marcia Carr as Rhonda Johnson, David James Campbell as Lieutenant Morgan, Fritz Matthews as Jimmy, Ted Pryor as Chuck, Teresa Van Der Wood as Jamie, and Diane Copeland as Debbie. So yeah, that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for the 1987 slasher Killer Workout. Um, I enjoy this movie in the way that I enjoy 80s slasher movies. Is it a good movie? No. But, is the acting bad? Yes. Is it cheesy? Yes. And that's why I like it. I mean, 80s slasher movies are in a subcategory all their own, in my opinion. So this one worked for me. I really had a good time with it. So let's just go ahead and get into it with the specific pros and cons as I see it. So, starting with the pros, uh, basically just the overall cheesiness and fun that's to be had with this movie. It's so 80s in terms of the style and the atmosphere, everything from the fights to the dress to the hair to the looks. I mean, it's got 80s all written all over it, and I just love those type of movies, that time period, that era, and all the cheesiness that goes along with it. Yeah, I just love everything about it, and this movie has that. So that's definitely a pro. I really like the setting of using the aerobic studio or the gym as for a slasher movie. It's really an untapped resource, in my opinion, of having these fit characters, good looking fit characters die as slasher fodder. Really enjoyable overall. Just that whole idea and that setting really worked for me. Obviously, I love the '80s music. The '80s soundtrack from this movie is very '80s, very fun. It also really fits the movie. I like the score of the movie as well. Just sort of the creepy sort of background music and atmosphere that's used. As I said, it reeks of this decade, and it really fits the overall tone of what this movie is all about and what it's going for. So, definitely a thumbs up on the musical aspects of this movie. I have to say, I like the opening scene with the tanning bed accident. Pretty good pyrotechnics and special effects. Obviously, not CGI. Especially for being a low budget slasher movie, which this one was. A lot of the 80s slasher movies are low budget or lower budget, but I think it does a decent job as well of setting up what's to come in this movie. That whole opening scene with the tanning bed accident. So very effective there. This movie does have a pretty high body count in terms of a slasher movie. So if you want a slasher with a lot of kills, this movie might be for you. That's one thing that really stood out for me. I think there's probably 8 to 10, maybe more than that. I can't exactly remember um, deaths in this movie. Overall, the movie does have a very simple premise, so it doesn't obviously doesn't make you think too much when you're watching it. But it does have, I thought it had decent red herrings and a decent twist at the end in terms of the killer reveal. I won't say it's one of the best twists of all time or anything, or I won't say that I had my jaw on the floor when I watched it, but it's pretty effective, I think, the way that they set it up, the way it plays out. Because who ends up being the killers? There's a thought that they might be the killer, but at the same time, they kind of play it out like it's this other character or maybe a couple other characters. I just thought they did a pretty decent job. And I know the bar is pretty low for 80s slasher movies or slashers in general when it comes to try to set up a good twist like that. But I thought it was fairly decent to effective in this movie. Um, the killer in this movie does have a very unique weapon, which is a gigantic safety pin, which I don't believe has ever been used as a weapon in any other slasher movie that I'm aware of, anyway. You just don't see that very often, very different. Um, and then, of course, you got the gratuitous aerobicizing by fit people in tight outfits, which some people will find that as a pro, some people might find that as a con, although the people that find it as a con probably aren't going to enjoy these 80s slasher movies anyway, I would guess. But yeah, just it's not so much gratuitous nudity in this movie, although there is some nudity, but it's more gratuitous workout, like all these fit people, the way that they're gyrating their hips and laying down on the floor and just everything about it. It's just like Dirty Dancing almost or something. So yeah, those are my pros for Killer Workout from 1987. As far as cons go, I will say, despite the fact this movie does have quite a few kills, they're not overly gory or bloody. There is some blood in the movie, but a lot of these kills are kind of cutaways or in the shadow silhouette too. So you don't really see a lot of on-screen violence or a lot of on-screen kills. It's like a stab here, a stab there with a safety pin. So that's kind of disappointing, especially if you're tuning in for an 80s slasher for the blood and the gore, the kills. Like I said, there's a lot of kills, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're effective or good kills. There isn't as much straight up nudity as you might expect given the setting or the premise of this movie. So for some people, that might be a disappointment because when you think of an 80s slasher movie that's set in an aerobic studio or a gym like this, you're probably thinking that's an untapped resource for a lot of nudity, a lot of gratuitous nudity. And there is some, don't get me wrong, but like I said, it's more the exercising that's the gratuitous part of this movie. Obviously, as you might come to expect, the acting is really pretty bad in this movie. Again, the fact that it's a lower budget type of movie for that era and this subgenre, it's not a huge surprise, but it is noticeably bad at times, and by most of the characters, I would say there wasn't anybody. I don't think that needs to save room on their shelf for an Oscar award. So that's a thing. Um, oh, let's see. The movie does take itself a bit too seriously, especially when you consider that the killer uses a large safety pin to stab their victims. But there are, I mean, they kind of shoot the movie and they play the movie a little too seriously for what's actually going on. And that's one of the cardinal sins for 80s slasher movies when they should just embrace the cheesiness of it, I think. And some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them try to be a little too smart for their own good. They try to be, no, we're taking this seriously. We're not just here to screw around. Be there to screw around. I mean, somebody's using like a diaper-sized safety pin on a giant baby or something to stab people. I mean, just say that a couple of times in your mind and realize that just have fun with it, the goofiness and the cheesiness of it. Don't try to be Inception here, and there's slasher movies that do that, especially from this era. So that's one thing about this movie. It does take itself a little too seriously at times. Plays a little bit too straight. As I said, maybe when they were making it, they forgot what type of movie they were making it and what era they were making it in and what subgenre. So that's something that stuck out to me as well. But those are my cons. Other than that, guys, I have a fun time with this movie. It was a first time watch for me, obviously, like many of the '80s slash movies will be in my collection. It's not more one of the more well-known '80s slasher movies, obviously, and this was also during towards the end of the '80s. After you got past '85, I think the MPAA cracked down on like mainstream horror movies being able to show a lot of blood and gore. So that's kind of a caveat to that con as well. Because if you think of like the Friday the 13th movies as they go, like in '88, '89, the gore and the kills are a lot less than they were in '81, '82, and I think that's just cracking down on censorship and stuff. And this movie kind of is in that point where they can't show quite as much as they could have 5 or 6 years earlier, probably. So I just wanted to point that out. As far as this Blu-ray goes, there's not really a lot of special features. You have a photo gallery, an original killer workout title sequence, and a killer workout trailer. Um, but this doesn't have like the transfer. You see this on Blu-ray and you think it's going to be amazing, but actually they could have put this on DVD as easily as Blu-ray. It doesn't have a great Blu-ray transfer. Like the movie looks fine for the most part, but there's a couple of scenes where you get some squiggly lines and there's a little bit of some of the audio is off at times. Not a lot, just a scene here or a scene there. Um, and I think that's because they didn't transfer it in high def or however that works when it comes to most Blu-rays, 1080 quality. I'm not really a nerd when it comes to all that stuff in terms of aspect ratios and stuff, but that's just kind of again, I'm not saying don't get it on Blu-ray if you want to have a fun 80s cheesy slasher movie. I would still definitely recommend it. But I'm just saying, prepare yourself for the fact that this isn't a high quality Blu-ray movie. But overall, guys, I had fun with this, and my ratings for 80s slasher movies are kind of on a different scale. I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10, but that's 7 out of 10 on an 80s slasher scale, as opposed to just an overall horror. If I was giving this an overall horror rating, it'd probably be like a 5.5 or a 6 at best out of 10. But as I said, I think I kind of have to have a different rating scale when it comes to 80s slasher movies. So on that scale, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I really had a good time with it. I enjoyed the setting. Um, I just enjoyed the cheesiness of it, the exercising, and some of the red herrings, and a little bit of the twist. Again, it's a low budget slasher movie from the '80s. It's not a good movie. If you're expecting to go in and be blown away, you're in the wrong subgenre of horror. But 7 out of 10 as an '80s horror slasher for Killer Workout from 1987. Go ahead and comment down below if you guys have seen this movie, what your thoughts are about it. Do you like it? Do you not? Why? Why not? Comment down below. Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. And please be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my great horror content, not just the rest of this series, but what I have coming out the rest of this year and into next year. So I would recommend this movie, especially if you're somebody that enjoys that era, '80s slasher movies. Just know what you're getting into. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up this review. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you're enjoying this series, this horror Blu-ray series that we're taking a look at. And yeah, I hope everybody's doing well. But of course, stay scared. Bye.